Welcome to Sleepcast, probably the most boring podcast in the world. Sleepcast is created to help you relax, slow down, and gently drift off to sleep. There's nothing you need to remember and nowhere else you need to be. Simply get comfortable, close your eyes, and allow tonight's quiet story to carry you away. And now, we hand things over to our two hosts for today's episode. Rest well and enjoy.
So imagine you're watching a true crime documentary.
Oh, like one of those really gritty late night ones.
Exactly. And the camera pans across this dimly lit alleyway. You've got this deadpan reporter staring right into the lens.
Setting the scene.
Right. And they're outlining the gruesome demise of a highly controversial, wildly famous public figure. They actually show the crime scene photos.
Which is always the wildest part.
It is. And you see this figure, face obscured, with a massive stylized knife wound right to the chest.
But I mean, this isn't a documentary about a cartel boss or like a political assassination.
No, it's not. This is a promotional trailer for a hip-hop album released in 2024. And the victim in this whole setup, the victim is Slim Shady.
Right, the infamous bleach blonde, cartoonishly violent alter ego of Marshall Mathers.
Yeah, Eminem. It's just this incredibly jarring piece of visual marketing.
It really is. I mean, you even have 50 Cent showing up in this trailer.
Oh, yeah, he's in there looking genuinely disturbed.
Yeah, he literally calls the character a psychopath. Just straight up.
Which really sets up this fascinating, almost unprecedented psychological thriller for us to unpack today.
Yeah, sure. Because you have an artist, Eminem, who is universally recognized as one of the most successful, technically gifted musicians on the planet.
Absolutely. And yet he is actively, publicly trying to assassinate the very character that built his entire empire.
Which is wild when you think about it.
So how did we get here? For you listening right now, our mission today in this deep dive is to decode the multi-decade evolution of Marshall Mathers.
And to do that, it's an evolution that requires us to pull from a really diverse array of perspectives.
You've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We're looking at intimate sit-downs, like his conversations with Rick Rubin on the Broken Record podcast.
That's a great one.
Yeah, and we've got deep socio-political breakdowns from NPR, too.
Plus, we're bringing in sociological studies of his fan base from Grammy.com and critical reviews of this exact murder of Slim Shady from The Guardian.
But the thread connecting all these pieces, right, is this relentless struggle with identity.
It's like peeling an onion, honestly. But, the onion is screaming at you in incredibly complex, multisyllabic rhyme schemes.
That is probably the best way to describe him.
Right. Let's unpack this. Because to understand why a 50-something-year-old elder statesman of hip-hop is grappling with national politics and terrifying writer's block and this monster he created, we have to understand what was inside that monster to begin with.
We have to start with the birth of the monster, the actual origin of Slim Shady back in 1997.
Yes, let's go back to the 90s.
Because a lot of people operate under this illusion that Eminem just fell out of the sky in 1999, fully formed.
Oh, totally. Grabbing his crotch on MTV and terrifying suburban parents.
Exactly. People think My Name was his first time at the microphone.
They really do.
Yeah.
But the reality, which is so crucial to understanding his psyche, is that in 1996, he put out a debut album called Infinite.
And, for lack of a better word, it completely tanked.
It just vanished, right?
It vanished. He was a struggling, broke, exhausted father in Detroit, trying to make it as a white rapper in an overwhelmingly black art form.
And the feedback he was getting was pretty harsh, wasn't it?
It was essentially, you sound too much like Nas, you sound too much like AZ, you just don't have an identity.
Wow. I mean, the failure of Infinite was a crushing, almost fatal blow to his career.
And to his mental health, honestly.
Yeah.
The sources we have point to the creation of Slim Shady not as some calculated boardroom marketing ploy.
Right. It wasn't focus grouped.
No, not at all. It was a desperate survival mechanism. When you listen to the Slim Shady EP from 1997, the opening track actually frames the character as a demonic possession.
Wait, a demonic possession, like a literal exorcist situation?
Sort of, yeah. It's this horror movie intro where Slim Shady literally invades Marshall Mathers' mind and takes over his body.
That framing is so vital, though. By making it a possession, it's almost like Marshall was legally absolving himself of whatever came out of his mouth next.
That's a great point. It removed the filter entirely.
It was a psychological shield, right? If he said something utterly horrific, grotesque, or deeply embarrassing.
It wasn't Marshall Mathers, the struggling father, saying it. It was Slim Shady, the villain.
Exactly. And this uninhibited, incredibly dark, horrorcore storytelling, which leans heavily into slasher film violence and hyper-exaggerated shock value, was exactly what caught the ear of Jimmy Iovine at Interscope.
Who then immediately played it for Dr. Dre.
And the Hall of Fame profile notes, Dre's reaction was basically instantaneous.
Yeah, he heard the tape and just said, "Find him now."
Because Dre understood what he was hearing, He was hearing a Trojan horse.
Let's expand on that. How are you viewing the Trojan horse in this specific context?
Okay, so think about the pop culture landscape in 1999.
Super pristine.
Exactly. It's pristine, it's boy bands, it's Britney Spears, it's very polished and safe. And Eminem constructs this massive neon-colored wooden horse called Slim Shady.
I love this analogy.
Right. So the exterior of this horse is painted with absolute outrage. It's foul-mouthed, it's making crass jokes about Christina Aguilera.
It's literally asking kids if they want to see him stick 9-inch nails through his eyelids.
Yes. So the media and the kids drag this horse right into the center of the pop culture citadel because they're just obsessed with the spectacle of it.
It was impossible to look away.
But once he's inside the gates, the trapdoor opens and out comes Marshall Mathers.
Out comes the actual humanity.
Exactly. Out comes the autobiography, the crippling poverty, the trauma of his childhood, the struggles with addiction, the fierce, almost desperate love for his daughter.
Things that mainstream pop audiences in 1999 might have completely rejected from an unknown artist from a Detroit trailer park.
Yep, if it hadn't been smuggled inside this psychopathic cartoon character.
That is a phenomenal way to understand his architectural brilliance, honestly. He engineered a multi-voice personality split that allowed him to be everything all at once.
So you have Slim Shady, the pure id, the provocateur.
You have Marshall Mathers, the vulnerable, damaged human being.
And you have Eminem, the overarching maestro, the technician holding the pen.
But, hold on, let me push back on that a bit.
Sure, go for it.
Engineering a three-way personality split sounds great on paper, or in a comic book. But living that out in the public eye,
That's a lot of pressure.
enduring the most intense media scrutiny of the early 2000s, while constantly shifting between a vulnerable father and a cartoon psychopath. How does that not just entirely fracture a person's psyche?
Well, I mean, it nearly did.
That's true.
We know from his later work and his memoir that the balancing act took a massive toll. It heavily contributed to his well-documented struggles with addiction.
For years, the Guardian Peace notes, there was intense, visible drama in how torn he was between these personalities.
But something shifted as he got older, right? By 2008, he wrote that Slim, M, and Marshall were actually all present simultaneously when he was in the vocal booth.
Yeah, he said he found a way to sort of morph the styles so that it's just all him. He stopped treating them as separate rooms in his brain and basically knocked down the walls.
But even with those walls knocked down, he never fully put the Slim Shady mask away.
Oh, definitely not.
Even when he sobered up, even when he started doing these highly introspective albums like Recovery, you'd still get these random, incredibly sharp flashes of the old villain.
Which is exactly what makes the 2024 death of the character so interesting to look at. Because he proved on albums like Kamikaze in 2018 and Music to be Murdered by in 2020 that he still knew exactly how to use Shady to hijack a news cycle.
Oh, absolutely. On that 2020 album, he had a track called Unaccommodating, where he dropped a punchline comparing himself to the terrorist who bombed the Ariana Grande concert at the Manchester Arena.
Right, and that bombing killed 22 people.
The backlash to that lyric was immediate and visceral.
It proved the edges of the character were still razor sharp.
Yeah, the Guardian critic, Alexis Petridis, made a great observation about this era.
What did he say?
He noted that Eminem had sort of transitioned into rap's grumpy dad, like deeply cynical about modern hip-hop trends.
Right, complaining about the new generation.
Yeah, but he was still completely willing to deploy these jarring, nihilistic lines just to prove he could still make the world flinch.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of this whole era. If the character is still potent enough to make the world flinch, why is he putting a knife in his chest in 2024?
Well, I think it comes down to creative exhaustion, Shock value has a notoriously short half-life.
It really does. People get numb to it.
Exactly. And for a guy who, as we'll discuss later, is so deeply obsessed with the sheer mathematics of songwriting, leaning on a 25-year-old alter ego's shock tactics might finally feel like a creative crutch.
The artist inside the Trojan horse is realizing the horse is starting to rot.
Yeah, and it's time to step out of it completely.
That makes total sense. And, it's not just the artist who is affected by this persona, it was the audience.
Oh, for sure.
Because when you build a neon Trojan horse that screams at people, you attract a very specific, fiercely dedicated kind of crowd.
You cultivate an audience that feels seen by that exact level of unfiltered rage.
And Eminem didn't just cultivate this audience. He accidentally gave them a name that now completely defines modern internet culture.
The stands.
The stands.
If you're listening to this, you know the word, you see it on social media, you hear it in casual conversation.
But we need to go back to the year 2000, to the Marshall Mathers LP, and look at the actual song Stan.
Because it is a chilling piece of psychological horror.
It really is. It's structured as an epistolary narrative, which is a story told entirely through letters.
And it's set over this hauntingly simple bass line and that Dido sample.
Right. We hear the letters of a fan named Stan writing to Eminem. And with each verse, which represents a new letter over a period of months, the psychological deterioration is just palpable.
You hear the transition from innocent admiration to obsessive entitlement. Like in the first verse, he just wants an autograph.
Just a standard fan letter.
Yeah, but by the third verse, he is seething with rage because he feels ignored. He tells a story about waiting in the blistering cold for 4 hours for Eminem, and Eminem allegedly just walked right past him.
And that perceived rejection from this figure, he has tied his entire identity to. It simply breaks his mind.
The climax of the song is honestly one of the darkest moments in pop music history.
Yeah, the final verse from Stan's perspective.
He's recording it while driving his car 90 miles an hour down a freeway, drunk, with his pregnant girlfriend locked in the trunk.
Yeah.
And he drives off a bridge.
The tragedy is sealed by the final verse, which is Eminem finally sitting down to write back to him.
He's giving him solid, healthy advice.
Right, only to realize mid-sentence that he's writing to the man he just saw on the news.
Now, here is what I cannot wrap my head around, and I really want your take on this.
Okay, what is it?
He writes a profoundly dark, cautionary tale about a literal stalker who commits a horrific murder-suicide because of his toxic obsession. And somehow, over the next 2 decades, pop culture adopts the name of that killer as a badge of honor.
Yeah, it's wild.
How does a psychotic break become an internet identity?
It is a massive, almost perverse irony, I completely agree. But it speaks to how deeply the core emotion of the song resonated with people.
Like, they ignored the crime part.
Basically. People stripped away the murder-suicide aspect and latched onto the sheer, unadulterated intensity of the devotion.
That's so fascinating.
The term slowly evolved. It morphed from a noun meaning a stalker to a verb. People started saying, I stand this artist, meaning they support them unconditionally.
It infiltrated the lexicon so thoroughly that the Oxford English Dictionary officially added it in 2017.
A word born from a rap force about a fictional murder is now in the definitive record of the English language. Let that sink in.
And Eminem is fully aware of the monster he created here, too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The sources note that he is co-producing a documentary titled Stands, which is set for global release in 2025.
It's directed by Stephen Lockhart, right?
Yeah, and it aims to dissect this incredibly complicated, volatile relationship between a fiercely private artist and an aggressively public fan base.
When you look at the Grammy.com exploration of stan culture, they root this entire phenomenon in the concept of parasocial relationships.
Right.
For anyone not familiar with that term, explain how this actually functions in the brain of a superfan.
So a parasocial relationship is essentially a one-sided psychological bond. A fan expends an enormous amount of emotional energy, time, and sometimes money feeling deeply connected to a celebrity.
They feel like they actually know this person.
Exactly. But the celebrity has absolutely no idea who the fan is. It is an illusion of intimacy broadcast on a mass scale.
And as the article points out, this didn't start with Eminem.
No, not at all.
They cite the tragic murders of Rebecca Schaeffer, Selena, and John Lennon. The fatal extreme of parasocial obsession has always existed.
But Stan provided a unifying label for it, and the internet provided the infrastructure for it to scale. Today, we don't just have individual stans, we have mobilized, weaponized digital armies.
The Bayhive, the Swifties, the Barbs.
The internet weaponized the dedication. The Grammy article does a phenomenal job showing the terrifying dark side of this.
Yeah, when fans wrap their identity in an artist, any critique of the artist feels like a personal attack on the fan.
Precisely. Look at the examples they highlight. In 2015, when Beck won Album of the Year over Beyoncé at the Grammys, the Bayhive didn't just express disappointment.
What did they do?
They digitally vandalized Beck's Wikipedia page over 100 times in a matter of hours.
Oh, wow.
Or in 2023, when a writer simply published a critical review of Taylor Swift's Eras tour, Swifties tracked down her personal information and doxed her.
Which resulted in actual threats to her safety. That's terrifying.
It is. There's a psychotherapist quoted in the piece, Scott Seaman, and his breakdown of the internal mechanics of a stan is really eye-opening.
He explains that these fans often use the artist to fill a void in their own self-worth, right?
Yeah, they desperately want to be seen by the idol. But because it's a parasocial relationship, the idol can never reciprocate enough to actually fill that void.
And Seaman notes that when the fan realizes this, when the illusion shatters, it can lead to a severe spiral of hopelessness.
Seaman makes a critical point here. No artist, no matter how empathetic, can take personal responsibility for the mental health of millions of strangers. It's an impossible, crushing burden.
But I want to make sure we aren't painting this with too broad of a brush. It's not just a wasteland of doxing and toxic behavior.
Right, we have to look at the whole picture.
The sources emphasize that there is a profound light side to this duality.
There is. For a lot of people, especially those who are marginalized or geographically isolated, these stan communities are their only real social network.
It's a place of fierce belonging.
And sometimes, the artists do bridge the gap in beautiful ways. The article mentions Nicholas Little, a dedicated fan of Nicki Minaj Barb, who talks about how she personally sent him merchandise and reached out to his family.
That validation can be totally life-affirming.
It really can.
And honestly, nothing illustrates the positive side better than the story about an Eminem fan from Paris.
Oh, I remember this from the source material.
Yeah, another superfan, Annalise Bowman, recounts being at a Formula One race in Texas. She meets a woman who had just flown in from Paris with her elderly father.
Right.
And this woman had just been released from a rehabilitation center for severe addiction only days prior.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is. And she told Annalise that Eminem's music, specifically his honest chronicling of his own addiction and recovery, was the only tool that got her through it. She used his pain as a blueprint for her own survival.
See, that is the ultimate duality of this stan. The exact same parasocial mechanism that can cause a fan to obsessively stalk an artist is the mechanism that can reach across the globe, into a rehab center in Paris, and literally save a life.
It provides a soundtrack for survival.
It's a breathtaking responsibility for an artist to carry. And speaking of scrutiny, his fans weren't the only ones dissecting his every word.
Not at all. Early in his career, Eminem was basically viewed by the media and the political establishment as an active threat to the moral fabric of society.
He was public enemy #1 for a lot of advocacy groups.
So let's pivot to how he navigated that intense institutional backlash, because it sets the stage for his eventual evolution into a highly political artist himself.
It's quite a journey.
Let's take the 43rd Grammy Awards in 2001. He is nominated for Best Rap Album for the Marshall Mathers LP, but the music is almost secondary to the controversy at this point.
The backlash was deafening. GLAE and other LGBTQ+ organizations were staging massive protests outside the Staples Center.
They were pointing to the rampant homophobic slurs and violent rhetoric on the album, demanding the Recording Academy rescind the nomination.
The tension was incredible.
And Eminem's response was a masterclass in subversion. He gets on stage to perform Stan. Now, everyone expects Dido to be sitting there singing the chorus, just like the record.
Right, that was the assumption.
But the curtain drops, and sitting at the piano singing the hook is Elton John.
The visual of the most controversial rapper in the world holding hands with one of the most iconic, openly gay men in music history at the end of the performance, it completely short-circuited the protest narrative.
But let me challenge that for a second. Was it just a brilliant PR stunt to get the heat off his back?
That's a fair question.
Like, does holding hands with Elton John magically erase the very real slurs he put on a record that millions of kids were listening to?
That's the exact debate people were having. But Scott Seaman, the psychotherapist we mentioned earlier, who was actually serving on a JLO panel during those 2001 protests, offers a really nuanced retrospective.
What's his take on it?
He views the Elton John reveal not just as a stunt, but as a metaphor for Eminem coming out of the closet in terms of his actual tolerance, stripping away the Slim Shady bigotry to reveal the actual person.
And history kind of backs Eminem up on that, right?
It does. While you can absolutely condemn the early language, the sources acknowledge that over the long arc of his career, Marshall Mathers demonstrated tangible growth.
He eventually dropped the slurs from his vocabulary entirely.
Yep, and he openly advocated for LGBTQ+ rights and publicly supported marriage equality long before it was federally mandated.
He grew up, and as he grew up, the anger that was previously directed outward at pop stars or inward at his own demons started to find a new target.
The structural inequality of the country.
Exactly, which brings us to the 2017 revival era.
This is a massive pivot point. He sits down with Michelle Martin for NPR, and the portrait you get is of a 45-year-old artist who is looking at the cultural landscape and deciding that his platform is too big to stay silent on systemic issues.
Right. And what's fascinating about this NPR interview isn't necessarily the specific politics themselves, but how Marshall Mathers decided to wield his cultural real estate.
Yeah, and just to be clear, for you listening, we're not endorsing these political views either way. Right?
Oh, totally. We're just reporting on where his mindset was at the time based on the NPR interview.
Yeah.
We are strictly looking at his evolution.
Exactly. So he was looking at the political climate under Donald Trump, and he felt a profound sense of anxiety. He tells Michelle Martin, "I love our country. I'm upset with it right now."
He explicitly points to the rhetoric being used at the time, specifically the campaign speeches characterizing Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists.
Right. And for Eminem, this felt like the country was actively sliding backward, and it infuriated him.
That fury birthed one of the most viral moments of 2017, his a cappella freestyle at the BT Hip Hop Awards.
Oh, the cipher.
Yes. It's this incredibly raw, aggressive takedown of the president, filmed in a stark, echoing parking garage in Detroit. And the aesthetic choice there wasn't an accident.
No, he cited the cover of Public Enemy's "You're Gonna Get Yours" as the visual inspiration.
He was consciously placing himself in the lineage of politically militant hip-hop.
But his focus wasn't solely on the Oval Office. He was deeply disturbed by the ongoing epidemic of police brutality.
He felt compelled to address it, but his approach as a songwriter is what makes it so unique.
He wrote a track called "Untouchable."
And instead of writing it from the perspective of an ally or a victim, he forced himself into the mindset of the oppressor. He told NPR he wrote the song from the perspective of a racist white police officer.
Why do you think he chose that specific, highly controversial vantage point?
I think he knew that if he just rapped about how bad racism is, it would sound hollow, like a celebrity just, checking a box.
That makes sense.
By rapping from the perspective of the racist cop, he could expose the hideous, twisted logic of systemic racism from the inside out.
He specifically mentions being gutted by the videos of Walter Scott being shot in the back while running away and Philando Castile being killed while reaching for his license.
Yeah, he said he was so flustered, so blindingly mad, it took him 2 full years to calm down enough to arrange his thoughts into Untouchable.
He was keenly aware of his status as a white guest in a black art form. He felt a deep obligation to leverage his massive white fan base to force them to look at these issues.
He even worked in tandem with Joyner Lucas, a black artist who released a similarly conceptual track called "I'm Not Racist," ensuring the conversation was being pushed from multiple angles.
But this is where Michelle Martin asks him the absolute best question of the interview.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
She corners him on the reality of his demographics. She points out that in 2016, his home state of Michigan, a crucial part of the Blue Wall, flipped for Trump by a razor-thin margin.
Right. A massive segment of Eminem's core audience, white, working-class, rural listeners, voted for the very man Eminem was attacking on BT.
So she asks him point blank, did you alienate your own core audience by drawing a line in the sand?
It is the ultimate dilemma for any megastar who steps into the political arena.
Do you dilute your message to protect your album sales? Or do you speak your truth and risk burning down a quarter of your fan base?
And his answer is so resolute, he basically shrugs it off.
Yeah, he tells her, I speak to everybody who is even remotely like me.
He refuses to categorize his fans by race or voting bloc. He operates on the belief that if you fundamentally connect with his music, you'll understand where his heart is.
And if you don't, if drawing a line in the sand over police brutality loses him fans.
He basically says, let them go. The message is more important than the metrics.
So he had this incredible trajectory. He uses a psychopath alter ego to kick down the doors of the industry. He unintentionally creates the blueprint for obsessive internet fandom.
He survives the media backlash of the early 2000s, matures, and decides to risk alienating his own base to tackle systemic racism.
The obvious question becomes, how does an artist maintain the actual mechanical craft of writing music while carrying all of that baggage?
Exactly. How do you sit down with a blank piece of paper when you are burdened with national politics, a 25-year legacy, and an audience that scrutinizes every single syllable?
For that answer, the sources direct us to this incredible collision of minds on the Broken Record podcast.
You have Rick Rubin, the Zen master of music production, and Malcolm Gladwell, the analytical sociologist, sitting down with Eminem to dissect how his brain actually works.
The first thing that jumps out is how Eminem views himself. Despite all the fame, he still describes himself as just a nerdy kid who is obsessed with the culture.
He talks about sitting at his Aunt Edna's house, writing his very first rhyme, trying to emulate LL Cool J.
He's a historian of the genre. He rattles off his foundational influences: Ice-T, Big Daddy Kane, NWA, Run DMC. You can hear the reverence in his voice.
He didn't view himself as a savior of hip-hop. He viewed himself as a student who was desperate to earn a passing grade from the architects of the culture.
But even a master student hits a wall. What blew my mind in this interview was his utter vulnerability about writer's block.
We are talking about a guy who is practically a human thesaurus, a guy who bends the English language to his will, and he openly admits to hitting terrifying creative droughts.
He uses this beautiful, very tactile metaphor. He says to Rick Rubin, by the time you get to your 7th and 8th album, there's nowhere to paint.
Nowhere to paint. It perfectly captures the exhaustion of longevity.
It really does.
If you've already rapped about your mother, your daughter, your addiction, your fame, your poverty, and your alter ego, what is left? When you have used every color on the palette, how do you make a new picture?
This is where Rick Rubin's genius as a producer comes into play.
Yeah.
Because when a hip-hop artist is stuck, the traditional move is to play them different hip-hop beats to inspire them.
But Rubin didn't do that.
No, Rubin played him Frank Zappa.
Which is such a wild pivot. Why Zappa?
Because Frank Zappa's music fundamentally ignores the rules of traditional pop structure. Zappa played with bizarre time signatures, abrupt tempo changes, and avant-garde instrumentation.
Oh, I see.
Rick Rubin realized that Eminem was creatively trapped inside the rigid 4/4 grid of traditional hip-hop beats. He was so mathematically precise that he had painted himself into a corner.
So by playing him Zappa, Rubin was essentially taking a sledgehammer to the grid.
Exactly. He was showing Eminem that the canvas isn't a square box. It can be whatever shape you want it to be.
He broke the geometry of the beat to free up the lyrics, and it led to these massive breakthroughs like the song Walk on Water.
Which, by the way, has the most casual flex of a backstory ever.
Oh my gosh, yes. Rubin casually mentions that he played the rough demo of Walk on Water for Jay-Z, and Jay-Z was the one who reached out and got Beyoncé to sing the chorus.
Just legendary figures moving puzzle pieces around.
But even with Beyoncé on the track, the core of what makes an Eminem song work is the relentless mechanical dedication to the rhyme scheme.
He doesn't just write lyrics. He constructs architectural blueprints of syllables.
Let's break that down for a minute because people throw around the term multisyllabic rhyming a lot. If you're just listening to the radio, you might think rhyming is just matching the last word of a sentence. Cat and hat.
Right, simple stuff.
But Eminem is matching the vowel sounds of 4, 5, sometimes 6 words in a row across multiple bars while maintaining a cohesive narrative.
Yeah.
It is literally verbal mathematics.
And he is so dedicated to the math that it often supersedes the narrative intent. In the NPR interview, someone asks him why he used to name drop and insult pop singers so frequently in his early career and why he doesn't do it as much now.
His answer is remarkably clinical.
It really is. It strips away all the perceived malice. He says, somebody's name hasn't really fell into the rhyme scheme.
That's it. It wasn't about a personal vendetta against NSYNC or Britney Spears. It was strictly about the puzzle.
If a celebrity's name happened to possess the exact phonetic vowel structure he needed to complete a complex 6-syllable puzzle at the end of a bar, he shoved their name into the song.
He viewed pop culture figures as phonetic building blocks, not actual people.
Which is a cold, almost robotic way to approach songwriting. But it is precisely that relentless, uncompromising dedication to the mechanics of the craft that has built his insurmountable legacy.
Let's just look at the raw data of that legacy for a moment, because when you zoom out, the footprint he has left on global culture is staggering.
In 2022, he received the ultimate institutional validation. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And he was inducted by his mentor, Dr. Dre, bringing the entire journey full circle.
The accolades are genuinely historic. He has 15 Grammy Awards. That includes a completely unprecedented run where he won Best Rap Album for 3 consecutive projects.
The Slim Shady LP, the Marshall Mathers LP, and the Eminem Show.
No one had done that.
He crossed over into Hollywood and became the first rapper to ever win an Academy Award, taking home Best Original Song for Lose Yourself from the 8 Mile soundtrack.
He has sold over 164 million albums globally. He wasn't just the best-selling rapper of the 2000s. He was the undisputed best-selling artist of the entire decade across all genres.
And perhaps the most telling statistic about his longevity. He is the only rapper in history to have a platinum-certified album in 4 distinct decades.
The 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s.
He has debuted 10 consecutive albums at #1 on the Billboard 200. Plus, through his label Shady Records, he architected the careers of massive acts like 50 Cent.
But the real legacy isn't the plaques. It's the DNA he left in the next generation.
You look at the absolute titans of modern music across entirely different genres. Kendrick Lamar, Billie Eilish, Ed Sheeran, J. Cole, Tyler, the Creator.
They all point directly back to him as a foundational influence. Yeah. He expanded the parameters of what a voice at a microphone was allowed to do.
How weird they were allowed to be and how technically precise they could get.
He bridged the hyper-technicality of the underground battle rap scene with the melodic sensibilities of global pop music.
So take a breath. Look at the immense arc we just traveled.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. We started with a frustrated, impoverished, nerdy kid in Detroit who literally had to invent a cartoonish, psychopathic, alter ego Slim Shady just to survive his own failure and force the doors of the industry open.
Then we saw how that Trojan horse accidentally laid the psychological blueprint for modern, obsessive internet fandom. He wrote a horror story called Stan, and the world adopted it as an identity, forever changing how audiences interact with celebrities.
We watched him mature, survive the media witch hunts, and intentionally strip away the shock value to become an elder statesman.
He used his massive, predominantly white platform to call out systemic racism and police brutality, deciding that stating his truth was more important than protecting his record sales.
And we saw how he maintained his sanity through all of this by treating hip-hop not as a soapbox, but as a mathematical puzzle.
Relying on his obsession with multisyllabic rhyme schemes to push through crippling writer's block, reinvent himself, and cement a permanent seat in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
It is one of the most complex, contradictory, and fascinating evolutions in modern art.
It truly is.
But before we go, I want to circle back to something we talked about in the middle of this deep dive. We spent a lot of time breaking down stan culture.
Oh yeah, the parasocial relationships.
Right. We talked about how fans will wrap their entire sense of self-worth, their entire identity, into a parasocial relationship defending a celebrity they have never met, all based on a one-way broadcast of lyrics and social media posts.
Right, an illusion of intimacy based on static media.
Exactly. So here's a final thought I want to leave you with, something to genuinely ponder long after you turn this audio off.
I'm ready.
We've seen how intense, how dangerous, and sometimes how life-saving these parasocial relationships can get when a fan is just listening to an album or reading a tweet. But what happens to stan culture in the imminent, rapidly approaching age of artificial intelligence?
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying avenue to explore.
Think about it. If millions of fans are already willing to aggressively dox critics, or on the flip side, use an artist's music to get sober, all based on a one-sided connection.
What happens when that connection is no longer one-sided?
Yes. What happens when an AI company trains a large language model on the entire psychological profile, lyrical history, and vocal cadence of an artist and creates a flawless digital twin?
You're talking about a fan being able to text their idol at 3 a.m. and the idol texts back instantly with a hyper-personalized response in their exact voice.
Yes. When that happens, does the illusion of intimacy shatter because the fan knows logically that it's just an algorithm? Or does it dangerously, irreversibly deepen the obsession?
Oh, I'd bet on it deepening the obsession, honestly.
If a fan's core psychological need is just to be seen by their idol, will an AI that remembers their birthday, asks about their day, and validates their struggles completely short-circuit the human brain's ability to distinguish between reality and parasocial fantasy?
When the idol finally writes back to Stan, but it's just code, the psychological consequences for fandom are going to be entirely unprecedented.
It's the ultimate evolution of the alter ego. Slim Shady might be dead, but the digital ghosts are just waking up.
That is going to keep me up at night.
Something to chew on the next time you put your headphones on and feel like your favorite artist is speaking directly to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. For you listening at home, keep asking questions, keep peeling back the layers, and we will see you next time.
And that brings another quiet episode of Sleepcast to an end. Thank you for spending this time with us. We hope our two hosts helped you relax, slow your thoughts, and perhaps drift gently off to sleep. New episodes of Sleepcast are released every day, 7 days a week, all year round. Follow Sleepcast on the podcast app you are using now, so new episodes are added automatically, and you can be notified whenever another wonderfully boring story is released. Until next time, sleep peacefully and good night. Sleepcast, probably the most boring podcast in the world.